All right, let's do this. Economics in 5 minutes. No BS, no fluff, just the stuff you actually need to know. And it all starts with one single, simple question.
So here's the question. Why can't you have everything? I mean, really, think about it. The mansion, the yacht, that TV that's just a little bit bigger than your cousin's. The answer to that question? Well, that's the reason this whole field of study even exists.
And the answer is a one-word concept: scarcity. Look, economics is built on this super simple fact. We all want stuff, right? But there just isn't enough of it to go around for everybody. If we had infinite pizza, we wouldn't need economists. But we don't. So this is the fundamental problem we're always trying to solve.
Okay, so our first big idea is really just grappling with that core problem. If you can understand this, everything else that follows is going to make a whole lot more sense.
And here's a direct consequence of scarcity. Because you can't have everything, every single choice you make has a kind of hidden cost. We call that opportunity cost. It's the value of the next best thing you gave up. So right now, by watching this, your opportunity cost might be a playlist of hilarious cat videos. I really hope we're making this a worthwhile trait for you.
All right, so if we can't have everything, what do we do about it? What's the solution? Well, humanity's first brilliant idea was basically, let's make a deal. And that brings us to the whole concept of markets.
You know, even the simplest trade shows something incredibly powerful. This isn't a zero-sum game where one person wins and the other loses. When we willingly trade my bananas for your apples, we both walk away better off. We've actually increased our happiness, or what an economist might call utility, without physically creating anything new. The trade itself is what creates the value. Pretty cool, right?
So what's the engine driving all of this trading? It really boils down to one word: incentives. This is the absolute core rule. People respond to incentives. That's the force that powers everything from your local farmer's market all the way up to Wall Street. If you can understand what motivates people, you can understand the market.
And this is where you see the two biggest forces of any market in action: supply and demand. It's a constant dance. Supply is just how much stuff is out there. Demand is how much people want it. See, higher prices? That gives sellers an incentive to supply more. Lower prices? That gives buyers an incentive to demand more. And the price? Well, it naturally finds its sweet spot right where those two forces meet.
Okay, so trading apples for bananas, that's pretty simple. But trading a goat for your Wi-Fi bill? Yeah, not so much. And that's where money comes in. Think of it as a universal translator for value. It's the, economic lube that just makes all these complicated transactions possible and keeps everything running smoothly.
All right, so we've seen how individual trades and markets work on a small scale. But how in the world do we measure all this activity for an entire country? Let's zoom out and take a look at the big picture. The yardstick that everybody uses is something called gross domestic product, or GDP. Now, the most important word here is final. We count the value of the finished loaf of bread, not the flour and the yeast and the water that went into it. Why? Because that avoids counting the same stuff twice and gives us a much clearer picture of what a country actually produced in a given year.
And this is the basic formula for how they calculate it. It's really just adding up all the spending in the economy. So C is consumption. That's you buying stuff, like a coffee. I is investment. That's businesses buying new machines. G is government spending on things like roads and schools. And finally, you add what we sell to other countries, exports, and subtract what we buy from them, imports. That's pretty much the whole shebang.
But we got to remember, GDP is just a number. It's a useful one, for sure, but it doesn't tell the whole story, not even close. It completely misses things like volunteer work or unpaid labor at home. And it definitely can't tell you if people are actually happy or fulfilled. It's just a tool, not a report card on a nation's soul.
So, okay, we've got this massive, unbelievably complex system chugging along. The logical next question is, who's in charge? Who's trying to steer this giant economic ship?
Well, broadly speaking, there are two main toolkits for managing the economy. On one hand, you have fiscal policy. That's the government's job. They use taxes and spending to either hit the gas or pump the brakes. On the other hand, you've got monetary policy. That's handled by the central bank, like the Fed in the US. They use tools like interest rates and the money supply to do basically the same thing. Think of it like two different drivers, but they're both trying to steer the same car.
And this brings up a question I'm sure you've thought about. If the government or the central bank can literally create money, Why not just print a ton of it to solve all our problems? Pay off debt, fund projects, you name it.
Well, here's the massive catch. Imagine the amount of stuff to buy in the country stays exactly the same, but everyone suddenly has way more money. What's going to happen? Prices have to go up. That's inflation. It's not that the goods themselves are more valuable, it's that your money is suddenly worth less.
And just in case you think a little bit of inflation is no big deal, take a look at this number. No, that is not a typo. That was the annual inflation rate in Zimbabwe back in 2008. We're talking about hyperinflation so extreme it can utterly destroy an economy, making money totally meaningless and wiping out savings overnight. And that is why central banks work so hard to keep it under control.
Okay, for our last big idea, let's zoom out one final time. Because no economy exists in a bubble, right? We live in this deeply interconnected, massive global system.
The big idea that underpins all of global trade is something called comparative advantage. Now, what this says is that even if one country is better at making everything, it still makes sense for it to specialize in what it's relatively best at and then just trade for everything else. This kind of global specialization, in theory, makes the entire world richer.
But of course, that efficiency comes with some pretty major trade-offs. On one hand, yeah, globalization can mean cheaper products and way more variety for us as consumers. But on the other hand, it can also mean that manufacturing jobs move from one country to another, which can really disrupt people's lives and whole communities. There's no easy answer here. It's a constant, tricky balancing act.
And you know what? This whole interconnected system is also surprisingly fragile. We all got a front row seat to this back in 2021 when one single container ship, the Ever Given, got stuck in the Suez Canal. It was the stunning real-world example of how just one point of failure can send these massive shockwaves across the entire global economy.
And all of this really brings us full circle. Because at the end of the day, economics is just the search for answers to three really basic questions. What do we make? How do we make it? And who gets all the stuff? Every economic system out there is just a different attempt to answer those questions. There's no single perfect solution. There are only a series of incredibly complex, ongoing trade-offs. So the real question for all of us is, which trade-offs are we willing to make?